Good morning, everybody. Michael the Maven, and today we're going to be talking about the pre-release announcement of Olympus OMD E-M1x. Typically, I do not do pre-release videos, but I was invited by Olympus to listen into their webinar about E-M1x. In some of the specs, they offered me a camera to test. It's coming shortly. If you guys want to know specific things about the camera, ask me in the comments below. I will take every suggestion seriously, and I will do that test if I can. Now, in the past, I also have to point out, camera companies avoid Michael the Maven because I am a camera tester. That's what I consider myself to do. I measure and report. I find strengths and weaknesses. I like to tell you where the camera breaks. This is why I could live on Maui and Canon would completely ignore me. I'm here. It wouldn't have cost them anything to have me come to their event. Sony, Nikon, all the other camera companies, they have never offered me a camera to test in advance. And it makes sense. When we looked at the NX1, I found a major flaw, I reported it. It's risky. If I was a camera company, I would not give Michael the Maven a camera to test pre-release. Olympus is the first camera company to do this. So huge credit to them. They are brave, I think, because I am really going to push that camera and tell you where its weaknesses are. And I told them this and they said, go, have at it. So they must have a lot of confidence in this camera. Something I have to point out is they also announced a 150 to 400 millimeter f4.5 zoom. The reason why this lens is important, it's not going to come out until next year, summer of 2020. That lens paired with the E-M1x makes a huge amount of sense. So as they went into their presentation, it clicked. So the question that I ask anytime a new camera comes out is about proficiency. We talked about that in the hierarchy of design. What can this camera do that no other camera can do? That was the question I had going in, and I can answer that for you now, especially when we talk about the combination of the lens. So 150 millimeters to 400 millimeters on a micro four thirds sensor that has a 2x magnification factor in terms of the equivalent focal length. So we're really talking about a 300 to 800 millimeter lens in terms of performance, but that lens comes with a built-in 1.25x teleconverter, which now puts it at up to 1000 millimeter equivalent focal length. And if you take into consideration the new 2x teleconverter they have coming out summer of 2019, that would put the range of this lens between 300 and 2000 millimeters. Okay, so integrated with image stabilization. Think about that paired on a flagship camera like the E-M1x. And because it's micro four thirds, the lens is going to be smaller. I don't have the exact size of it or the weight, but obviously it's going to be a lot smaller than, say, a Canon full frame 600 or 800 millimeter lens. It's obviously going to be a lot smaller. So the idea and what I got from it was that as a sports and wildlife photographer, if you are out and about, let's say National Geographic style, or even shooting at a sports event all day, handling those lenses, they get heavy. Often photographers have assistants handing them these lenses back and forth. And what Olympus is trying to do, my understanding of it is they're trying to get you to stay in the moment as you are shooting. So, for example, if it starts raining, with Olympus cameras, the weather sealed ones, you don't have to stop and put a cover on. You can keep on shooting. It's the only camera that I would say is pretty much waterproof. They showed videos of them being sprayed with water and no problem. They encourage that kind of abuse, and I can't say that for many other camera manufacturers. So the idea is that if you take away all this extra weight, integrate it all into one lens, the stress level, the fatigue level on the shooter goes down, and they're able to perform at a higher level. That is a very strategic train of thought in terms of carving out a niche. So coming back to the E-M1x in the specifications, a lot of it is very similar to the OMD E-M1 Mark II. In terms of the sensor, it's the same. The focusing points, 121 phase detection, all cross point, almost edge to edge coverage, so tremendous focusing range. When I tested that focusing system, it scored in the high 80s. And this is the problem I have with pre-release videos, is I really don't know how it's going to perform until I get my hands on it. All that said, the two things that really stuck out to me about the E-M1x was two TruePix 8 processors. So they're doubling the processor capability of the camera. And what we saw in the Fuji X-T3, they did the same thing, these quad processors. That resolved what I referred to as the elbow problem. What that means is the camera is able to measure and sample subjects faster with more processing power. Again, I don't know how this is going to translate to real world shooting. That's one expectation that I have, is that the focusing processing is going to be much better. Another part of this is the algorithm included in the E-M1x is artificial intelligence trained. So they trained the computer to make this algorithm that could recognize things like the helmet as they are riding a bike, for example. So that's great news, because artificial intelligence is starting to find its way into the algorithms of larger sensors, talking about away from smartphones. That was the second big thing. Another point about the E-M1x is it boasts a 7-step image stabilization for its sensor. That's a world's record. It was 5.5 in the OMD E-M1 Mark II. I was very impressed with that. You can handheld shoot video at 5.5 steps, no problem. I was almost able to walk around with that camera without a gimbal and get usable footage. So obviously, I'm very interested to see if that'll work. If you pair it up with a 12-100, 7.5 steps of stabilization. To give you an idea of how crazy that is, if you can shoot at 1/60th of a second, handheld, no image stabilization, 7.5 stops or steps is going to get you into the 1 to 2 second range handheld. If that is true and it tests out to be that way, that would be astonishingly amazing. There are many other obvious bells and whistles, but we've seen a lot of these on the OMD E-M1 Mark II, such as Pro Capture at 60 frames per second. We get pre-buffering, I think it was 35 frames, and then when you shoot, I was only able to get a couple seconds of Pro Capture before the buffer filled. So that's another question, is how fast does the buffer fill? How fast does it empty? All these things are going to be tested. Obviously, the grip, it's integrated vertical grip, made to operate exactly the same from horizontal to vertical, depending on how you hold it. It should feel the same. There are 2 joysticks even. You know, I like the joystick. Now, obviously, in terms of the specs, in terms of the mechanical shooting, 18 frames per second in the electronic mode with continuous autofocus, same as the OMD E-M1 Mark II, which was 15 frames per second mechanical without continuous autofocus, 10 frames per second continuous autofocus with mechanical shutter. Obviously, dual card slots, built-in GPS, all magnesium alloy body. There's a built-in electronic ND feature, very interesting. I would love to see it in action. We won't know until we try it. Olympus is also boasting about a handheld high-resolution mode. Again, this is something, maybe it's because of the sensor, but we won't know until we test it. Can't wait to try that out. So price is $3,000 and it's set to go on sale February of 2019. So obviously, I'm going to put some links in the description. You guys can go and read the full press release and gather as much information as you can. But I still have some questions. I'm sure you do too. Let me know in the comments below what they are. I'd love to hear them, and I'll test it out as soon as I get the camera. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.